An Empire of Ice and Fire by Longclaw 1-6. Chapter 50. Battle of the God's Eye.
Ooh. This is impressive, John remarked, running his hand along the painted canvas. The figures, the background. It is as if I am witnessing the scene firsthand.
Beaming from the praise of Riza, the artist shrugged.
I wouldn't go that far, Your Majesty, but thank you.
He spoke the common tongue well enough, indicating he had been a master rather than a freedman, but Mosador said he was loyal, or else he would never have gotten a private audience with the Emperor. It is a style I, and my mentor before me, and his mentor before him, have been trying to perfect for decades now. Thus why Lord Mosador seeks to commission a depiction of the freeing of the slaves of Yunkai. Who was I to deny Misa a chance to express my techniques in her honour? Barristan had told John before of his father, Rhaegar Targaryen, the man of many contradictions. A strong and powerful fighter, he had also been a man of the arts, of culture. One who hoped to use his reign to turn a nation of wood and straw into one of brick and marble, to reclaim the spirit of old Valyria outside of the squalor that centuries of torpid kings, scheming bastards, and narrowly ambitious lords had left on Westeros. Admiring the hidden brushstrokes, the throes of emotion in the freedman brilliantly captured by the artist, the ethereal beauty of his Daenerys that captured her essence in the way the stylized monstrosities of statues back home couldn't, John felt the same passion of his father course through him.
I have not seen such detail since the mosaics at Dragonstone. No form of art in Westeros can truly compare to it.
A flash of disgust crossed the artist's eyes, but he kept his deferential facade. Don't think too much of the masters and sculptors of Westeros, sire. They are too traditional for their own good. Every sculpture looks the same, and never looks like the person they are seeking to represent. Something my members of my guild are trying to correct. We call it Neo-Valyrian, as the Valyrian styles of mosaics and frescoes largely died out with the Doom. Hearing about sculpture, John felt his heart soar. The memory of the highly stylized statues of Ned Stark, his father in all but name, in the crypts of Winterfell came to mind.
When Empress Daenerys and I retake the Red Keep, I will need enough of these paintings to fill the halls. Can I trust on you to create more?
Oh, yes, sire! I am honoured! He bowed low.
I would also like to commission a specific work of my own. Would it be possible to make an accurate, as can be, sculpture of my father? Both fathers, actually. Rhaegar Targaryen and Eddard Stark?
The artist pondered it. Both are not among the living. I could draw a sketch based on recollections, and my colleague can work from that if it is up to your satisfaction, sire.
I still remember father, and Barristan remembers Rhaegar. John nodded. That can be arranged. Thank you for your gift to the realm, and I am eager to see what you will show me next.
The artist bowed once more and left the room, guards closing the door behind him. Looking back at the magnificent work of art, John ran his thumb across the painted image of his wife, his long-lost love, building her empire in Essos, while he was with the wildlings north of the wall. Captured just how she was being raised atop the exultant crowd of newly freed slaves. The expression of joy and happiness shone on the canvas made him smile. With all that was going on, the stress of the trials of captured harpies and sympathizers, not to mention the anger from the nobles and the counter-range from the freedman, the image of his love brought warmth to him.
I love you, Daenerys,
he whispered to no one in particular, hoping that she could hear him, even from across the globe. I knew you had changed the moment you arrived at home with father. Turns out someone had heard him. John turned around to find Bran, the guard that wheeled him in, bowing and leaving them be. Didn't take it for a girl, though. A weak and emotionless chuckle left his thin, pale lips. Once I saw Daenerys in this very place. I knew. John smirked, crossing his arms.
I wouldn't expect any less from a warlock.
The carefree, adventurous boy he had watched grow up was gone. On the outside rested a weak, frail cripple. But from demonstrations and the sudden arrival of a fully talking Hodor, or Willis, rather, John knew there was immense power underneath the unassuming exterior.
Didn't expect such a change from my brother, he mused.
And I didn't expect to find a Targaryen in the family, cousin. Bran replied, the ghost of a grin on his face. Such was the extent of his emotion these days. Nodding, John reached over and clasped Bran on the back.
Seems we have that in common then.
He took a seat across from Bran.
Changing into persons we never expected to be. Or being with people we never expected to know.
He smirked at his younger brother.
At least with the woman who fell for my little brother. It wasn't a total shock. Circumstances unexpected. But a Stark with a Reed isn't.
Bran offered a small smile, remembering the moment he realised his true feelings for Mira. He couldn't grant her the deep affection he had seen John give his love. It brought him satisfaction after his shade of the evening visions to see John finally have the true happiness after being denied his true heritage for so long. But he did as much as he could in his own way. No person can help whom they love, John. Nor you, nor your parents.
No, I suppose not.
John's smile fell, as he regarded Bran with different, more searching eyes.
Brother, does your magic give you the ability to green see?
The image of the old man, the three-eyed raven, came to Bran's mind. Sometimes. I get better every day. If he told John what it would take to improve his gift, he'd lock him up in the cellar to keep him safe. Why?
Do you see into my future? Do you see anything about the battles to come?
Bran closed his eyes, remembering the vision of the warrior and his wife, of the ultimate sacrifice. Keep Daenerys close, brother. Keep her close.
Have found close to fuck all, pardon my Valyrian. Used to be that bands of a dozen wildlings would make it to Castle Black. But since that brood of 5 giant pups that Marg and One found 2 weeks ago, nothing. Methinks the Night King has taken everything north of the wall. Not a living soul still exists up there. Still no sign of the dead. Sea patrols found Hardhome deserted. Raiding it has added to our food stocks, so we will be fine. But for the sake of all of us, fucking finish the war so our backs aren't caught in a fucking vice, my lady. Edison Tollett, Lord Commander.
Paper falling from her hand to atop her desk, Sansa let out a deep sigh. It was beyond hope that they could find another large cache of free folk hiding somewhere north of the wall. Too many had been sent south, leaving only young boys, old men, women, and the Night's Watch to guard the north. Not enough men at all. We can write Daenerys and Mother for more, Rickon said hopefully, despite essentially having run the entire north with Lyanna Mormont, with whom he was growing rather close, Sansa observed, since Court had left for Riverrun. He was still rather brash and unrefined. As acting lady until Marjorie was officially part of the pack, Sansa took over much of the Lord's duties in Rob's stead as once she arrived. Nevertheless, she included him in many decisions. The dead aren't at the wall yet, and I don't see them getting through without something big. There was nothing I can think of yet. Joffrey, she shuddered in disgust, is the pressing threat. Rickon eyed her ruefully. What? He gulped. What was he like? Joffrey, that is. Having never left the north, he was curious as to the young king that had caused his entire family and life to be uprooted. Sansa searched her mind to think of the best way to describe him to her youngest brother. Take Ramsay Bolton, she said finally, watching him flinch involuntarily. Take him and make him an idiot, plus a madness that consumes a person until nothing left but savagery and cruelty. Ramsay's intelligence made him the greater adversary, but at least he had some impulse control. Tortured but let live. With Joffrey, her very life was in the balance of whatever whims he had to that day. To think I once thought of him as my golden prince. Oh, the youngest Stark looked to the floor, shifting his feet. Images of the young boy struggling to keep up with Bran and Arya coming to mind. Sansa smiled at him. The world was going to hells all around, but children like her niece and nephew, and growing men like Rickon, needed a sense of normalcy in their lives. Despite their mistakes and allowing Jon to grow up a bastard, Eddard and Catelyn Stark gave their kids such normalcy as they could, for as long as they could. Rickon, why don't you start your training early? I'm sure Rob and Jon would love to see your skills improve. It did the trick. Rickon lightening from his earlier melancholy, he kissed Sansa's head and left the study. Frowning once more, Sansa looked at the stacks of granary reports that had arrived that day. Months of Bolton mismanagement on top of all the deaths in the wars had left supplies on a knife's edge. Not having to supply Castle Black and Molestown would help somewhat, but the lack of southern imports meant there would have to be further belt tightening. It didn't sit well with her, but the lessons of her parents resolved Sansa over the need to make such a decision if need be. A knock disturbed her thoughts. "Enter," Sansa stated flatly, knowing the guards wouldn't let anyone come close that could be a threat. As expected, Maester Walkin emerged through the now open doorway. "My lady, 2 dispatches have arrived from you. One from the south and one from further away." Sansa nodded. "Thank you, Maester. Please leave them on the table." Returning to her furious transcribing, she heard a soft plop and closed the door. Transfer orders and ration cutting became official upon the stroke of a quill pen, as did the orders to send the Manderley fishing and whaling fleet as far out to sea to harvest needed seafood, even if they had to go all the way to Ibben. Picking up the first dispatch, a warm smile formed on Sansa's face as she recognised Podrick's seal. His communications were few and far between in the last few months, but each successive one received were growing to be a treasure for her. The feeling was alien, but not unwelcome. Unfurling the tiny scroll, Sansa began to read. "Dearest Sansa, tensions are boiling over within Meereen. His Majesty is set to execute the captured sons of the Harpy, and many influential nobles are seething at this. The masters gather at Yunkai, and we do not know when they will strike. The Emperor wishes to get home to the Empress as quickly as possible, and I am worried he may unleash the dragon unwisely. Brandon, Sir Barristan, and myself seek to calm him." "Oh, Jon," Sansa said to herself, such brash behaviour just wasn't that of a dragon. The direwolf had it in spades, if Arya and Robb were any indication. "If I were honest with myself, and it is easier to write this on paper than to say it out loud, I so too wish to come home. To you. I understand the hardship you have suffered, and am willing to wait if need be. But I would hope you give me the honour of courting you, Lady Sansa. Sir Podrick Payne, Knight of the Realm." Staring at the script in front of her until they blurred into unreadable squiggles in the paper, Sansa felt her heart beginning to beat in her chest. Did she read it right? Was he truly expressing his interest in her? In that way? Certainly the innuendo and subtle glances before were put into perspective. Part of her knew this was logical, but did she truly realise the likelihood of this development? Perhaps not. She set the paper down, thoughts too jumbled to deal with the situation at the moment. Hands trembling with apprehension and delight? She took up the second dispatch. Blood ran cold at the sigil of House Baelish. "Most beloved Sansa, just remember, you have a devoted and committed ally in the Lion's Den. Peter Baelish, your loving servant." What happiness Podrick's letter had brought her had frozen into the ice that was the north. Try as she might, Sansa couldn't get the spark of joy to banish the disgust Lord Baelish brought her. She let her head fall on the table, balling her fists in frustration. This was not going to be simple for her. "Impressive, isn't it?" Sun glinting off the vast expanse of the God's Eye in the distance, light shimmering, rippling on the water. In the light breeze, Jaime and the other lords and officers of the army of the Holy Chimera stared at the formation of their army. "Robb Stark hasn't lost his edge for tactics," Tywin remarked with his trademark deadpan tone. No one could tell his emotions, not even his own son. Horses shifted underneath the lords, animals somehow sensing the death and destruction that would befall the as-yet placid morning. "Tight formations with their pikemen positioned to deal with our heavy cavalry. Bowmen and cavalry ready to counter-attack," observed Randall Tarley, face not even more sour and approachable than normal. "Still outsmarting from River Run," Jaime suspected. "They have the best position. No need to do anything but let us impale ourselves on them," added Lord Roland Craighall, chafing on his saddle. "Crafty, but a bit on the portly side." Jaime nodded. "Overall, a tough nut to crack, father." He thanked the Seven that there was no dragons this time. if their intelligence was to be believed. A campaign veteran as he was, Jamie knew military intelligence was a misnomer, often only worthy to wipe your ass with. Snorting, Tywin peered at the marching formations of his own army as they formed on their assault positions below a small ridge face, on which they themselves stood. The hardest nut to crack, if enough pressure is applied. The hardest nut always cracks if enough pressure is applied. Any proper Lannister should know this, my son. He glanced dismissively at Jamie. No matter how Tywin tried to break him, the kind streak that dwelt within his son wouldn't go away. What a disappointment. Are the men ready? The front ranks are, my lord, but the ground is still too wet. Randall had the urge to lead a full assault on the ranks of the foreign invaders and traitors. Supporter of Rhaegar Targaryen though he was, he held off. We scouted the land beforehand, and the only paths through the march are direct, narrow route or a wide flanking move on either side. If I wanted an explanation, I would ask for it, Lord Tarly. While Joffrey would have demanded a full assault, Tywin seemed calculating, but equally bullheaded. Full attack, but do not commit all of the men just yet. A chorus of, yes, my lord. Deep bellows of red horns resounding across the landscape. In the van were columns of House Marbrand. Many of their fellow countrymen lost to dragonfire and unsullied spears. They drew their swords gladly in order to charge. Led by Lord Marbrand, and backed by other Westerland houses at the bulk of the Tarly men, they aimed for the centre of the marsh and surged forward. As the cavalry positioned in a wedge formation to flank around the march, Lord Enos Ferren, Kevin Lannister's second in command, ordered a quick trot to cover the ground but conserve energy before a charge. Allow the archers time to soften up the spear wall and for the infantry attack in the centre to engage in significant numbers. But his knights were impatient, anxious to avenge their fallen comrades and launch an immediate attack. After furious arguments, he finally gave in. His knights charged towards the edge of the marsh in a disorganized pell-mell of galloping hooves and sharpened lances. Arranged in a tight semicircle north of the cold marshland, the Imperial forces watched as it drew closer. The ground below was soggy, muddy in certain places, but had enough time to mostly dry out from the previous day's rains. Large pikes embedded in the dirt, the front line of the Free Folk and Northerners formed the supposedly impenetrable spear wall used so successfully at Riverrun. A porcupine, as Olenna Tyrell referred to it, though with profane words attached. Nestled within were the cannon and longbowmen, awaiting their orders. Peering out, Robb watched as the Lannister foot soldiers entered the patch of dry ground respecting the march. To his left, the heavy cavalry wheeled around the marsh, moving to hit the auxiliaries in his flank. Archers! Knock! Reaching down, the bowman plucked an arrow out of the soil and drew back. The artillerymen brought their torches to position, waiting for the order. My lord, should we send in the cavalry? Brienne asked, pointing back to where the Second Sons and House Corbray's knights waited on the hill behind the formation. Robb shook his head. Not yet. Take a third of the reserves to the left. Brienne nodded and headed for her horse. Loose! In a wave of black, the arrows ascended to the heavens. Long seconds passed before they arced downward into the mass of men below. The cannons boomed successfully, sailing over the heads of pikemen and men-at-arms for a more direct path towards the Lannister formations. Blood spurted as the projectiles hit home. Men shrieked from pain and from arrows embedded in their limbs and torsos, some falling into the icy waters of the march. Cannon shot barreled ahead with unstoppable momentum, hacking off arms and legs where they didn't punch through armour, imploding heads and tearing gory chunks off bodies of men and horse alike. But the cannon was slow to reload, and raised shields headed off arrows for the most part. Bloodied, but not stopped, the oncoming forces fanned out as Lannister archers joined the fray from beyond the march. Ferren's knights lowered their lances and made the final dash towards the awaiting Essosi. The battle began in earnest. Flinging his bulky form between two soldiers, the armoured red cloak embedded his sword in a Stormlander's back before Robb Stark hacked his head clean off. To his left, Gendry saved a pikeman by slamming his warhammer into a red cloak's skull. Blood and sweat soaking his cloak, Robb raised ice in the air with a wolf howl.
Spears and shields, boys! Hold the line! Arrows! Screamed a random bannerman. Seeing the cloud of dark forms rapidly approaching, Rob grabbed a shield from a dead mantle and covered himself just as the projectiles fell all around him. The boom of a cannon failed to mask the screams of men they did hit. Gritting his teeth, Rob shared a look with Gendry. His future brother-in-law was forced to improvise, a dead Redcloak corpse acting as a shield. Creative! Rob yelled, finding the amusement he felt quite out of place. Gendry grinned sheepishly. We make do in Fleabottom. Rob laughed harder, the hiss of arrows and the snap of them hitting his shield all around them. I'll make sure the armourers make more next time. Yeah, dogging doing, came the reply, causing more hysterics. The latest barrage of archers was only the latest act in the half an hour of carnage. Already the floodplain south of the God's Eye was soaked with blood and bodies, or twisted broken pieces of bodies decapitated with swords or blown apart by cannon. Crossbows and the more numerous tardy longbowmen had made their strength in the numbers known. Swaths of bolts and arrows dealing heavy counter-battery fire with the Imperials and allowing Lord Marbrand to fully commit his forces all along the line with the Reach legions advancing nearly unmolested. But the Porcupine held firm. On the Imperial right and centre were Lord Glover and Rob withstood a heavy attack by the Westerland's heavy infantry. And on the left, where the auxiliaries rallied under heavy pressure from the mounted forces, the proud knights making little impression on the dense forest of long spears, and a small number of riders being killed under their horses. One of them being Lord Farron, what organisation left nearly disintegrating. Luckily for the Lannisters, General Cavan arrived in time to witness the discomfiture of his cavalry, and quickly restoring discipline and ordering a general retreat to regroup. Ice tasted blood yet again. Another flash of crimson joined another dark red hues marring the Valyrian steel, as Rob sliced the sword arm off of a bull of a man of Marbrand colours. A sharp kick sent the shrieking man away from the line. Grunts and curses him to his left found a cluster of Stark men falling. Reverse! He yelled. Line to the rear! 5 paces! The orders carried out from officer to officer, the formation staggering back several yards, contracting inward to fill in the gaps. Torward! He screamed at his final reserve. Fill the ranks! Took you long enough. Tormund grinned, bloodlust high. With me, you morons! Dip your peckers in! With a howling screech that haunted many a Lannister knight from Riverrun, the freemen advanced to the main line. My lord! Rob fell behind the line, finding Brienne returning to his left flank. Her left shoulder plate had been sheared off, a shallow gash running a line along her upper arm. A dark red bruise covered her forehead. We're in bad way! 2 cannon lost in the mud, and Tywin's brought fucking crossbow to hit us from a distance. Peeking over the free folk reinforcements adding their stubborn hides to the frontal spear wall, Rob could just about see the spot where several large Tarly banners joined House Marbrand and Craighall, forming up for another assault on the line. They could hold, but it would be a close-run thing, bloody in every conceivable way. He made his decision. Time to spring the hammer. Get me the fucking signal! He yelled at his colour guard, grabbing the blood-red direwolf emblazoned over a checkered grey-black landscape. Rob waved it high atop him. Come on! Come on! Sunlight glinting off their armour, Lord Lyn Corbray spotted the fabric signalling of his commander. The cold bit at his nose, though he barely noticed. Nothing compared to the mountain gales of the Vale. Crownlanders, the pompous shits just like their weather. He found this applied to the north and its people as well. Sellswords too, the good nobleman treating with foreign rabble to his left beneath him. And yet they were formed on the same side of this engagement. Shall I give the order, my lord? His chief knight asked. Lord Stark has given the signal. Looking at his men, clutching their lances in tight in anticipation, a smirk crossed Lord Corbray's face as he once more looked at Rob, the desperation on his face. Yes. Come on, you bastards! Rob seethed through gritted teeth, eyes shifting between Corbray's Vale Knights and the light cavalry of the Second Sons. Fucking move! And they did. With a jerk of the hand, the mass of horsemen banked around, away from the fight. Gut sinking, Rob watched with wide eyes and tight lips. He could spot the haughty smirk on Lord Corbray's face.
and the lieutenant of the second sons laughing as he sent an obscene gesture his way. It suddenly became clear. They had been betrayed. Lowering his spyglass, Lord Tarley glanced at Tywin quizzically. "Corbray? Naharis?" Tywin looked at the waves of cavalry, armoured Vale knights and leather-clad sellswords, leaving the field of battle in droves for the King's Road. Heading northeast, to the ruins of Harrenhal. His expression was as fat as always. "The Eyrie and the twins are good bargaining chips. What use do the Frey have for them? They're dead. Though Naharis," a ghost of a smirk formed on his lips, "turned for less than I thought he would." A low laugh left the various lords, squires and officers clustered around the two commanders. Even Lord Tarley cracked a grin, chuckling. "I wonder what Queen Daenerys will say when she finds out her lover betrayed her." Jaime remarked, sarcasm dripping. Whatever he had seen before, the new Jaime Lannister despised such dirty tricks. "Well, she shall tell him herself, if Euron Greyjoy manages to take Dragonstone as I asked him to." Tywin didn't even look at his son, too concentrated on the Imperial line being gradually forced back under the weight of his legions. "With any luck, I shall be able to present her, and the bastard king, and the young wolf to our king by week's end," he shrugged. "Or their heads, just as good." Several ragged cheers broke out from the lords as Jaime muttered a curse. "Lord Tarley, is the first banners of our western army that I see?" Roundel pointed to the spyglass towards the woodland that lined the southern shore. "Aye, the colours of Alstain, if I recall correctly." "You did." "Good. Signal for them to charge." Tywin turned to Lord Crakehall. "Fire rockets on the Imperial forward line." Lord Crakehall raised an eyebrow. "Won't that hit our own men, my lord?" "Most likely." Tywin was nonplussed. "We have reserves, plus plenty more conscripts from King's Landing or Lannisport if we need them." He laughed. "Small folk breed like rabbits." It was Jaime who responded, for none of them seemed to disagree with Tywin. "Are you mad, father?" He closed his fingers in a tight grip on Tywin's shoulders. "Those are our men! We have a noble's duty towards them." Tywin shrugged off his son's grip. "Be careful, my son. You do not want to have the smiths of the Red Keep forge another golden hand for you." He ignored the narrowed eyes from his only son, at least in his eyes, as the hidden batteries behind them opened up to one side from the other. Demonic streaks overpowering his system, Robb felt the earth shake from beneath him. Nearly half a dozen more of the divine firebolts screamed in, one crashing into the ground not 7 yards away. The resulting blast waves threw Robb around like one of Sansa's childhood ragdolls. Chunks of sod tossed all around. A stabbing pain perforated his side as whiteness clouded his vision. The very next thing Robb registered was a loud ringing in his ears. He slowly rose to his feet, swaying slightly as his body throbbed. "Fucking hell!" He focused, the ringing slowly fading. "Robb!" A voice yelled softly from a long ways away. Everything was so surreal. The Lord of Winterfell felt like he was swimming underwater, with Gendry's face appearing right in front of his. "Robb!" He blinked. "Huh?" "What in the bleeding fuck was that?" screamed Brienne, not the normally indefatigable warrior, nearly in hysterics. "Motherfucker!" Tormund bellowed, ruddy face pale. "Motherfucker!" Robb continued to blink his eyes as his senses returned. "Shit!" he hissed. The numbness had dissipated, and he was suddenly aware of the aches and scrapes perforating his body. "What the hell happened?" Pieces of body, burned and twisted into unrecognizable shapes, were strewn everywhere, the smell of burnt flesh permeating the air, harsher than the normal stank of battle. "They're charging!" Gendry yelled, pointing to the surging Lannister second line. Despite red cloaks mixed in with the fallen Imperials, rockets indiscriminately targeting any living being within their target radius. It was the Imperial line that suffered the worst. Any unit cohesion in the Porcupine was rattled at best, non-existent in places. Readying outside the blast radius were the Tarly levies, Lannister knights, and arriving Dornish forces on the reinforcement. All were exhausted from the morning's exertions and fast marches, but they advanced in good spirits anyway, a crushing wave of men and steel upon the broken army of the young wolf. It all felt so satisfying for Tywin, watching scores of Imperial men fall to Dornish blades and waves of rockets. Battle after battle, fight after fight. Only through trickery and treason was the patriarch of House Lannister ever able to outsmart the young wolf. And yet, now it had happened. Perhaps I could dine in Winterfell at the end of this campaign, he mused. The resounding roar of hoofbeats growing ever louder put a rest to his grandiosity. "Keep formation!" Robb yanked at the fallen lad, no more than 8 and 10, pushing him back into the fight. "For God's sake, men! Hold!" A furious slash of his sword sent a mounted cavalryman flying to the ground. 2 separate assaults and the insane barrage of enemy weaponry had seen them hold, but this third push might see them collapse. He could see it firsthand, the haunting strain even in the indefatigable free folk. The cannon were helping, but there weren't nearly enough. Suddenly Robb felt someone shove him into his shoulder. He turned only to scream at the bastard that did so, only to find nothing. Nothing but the shaft of a crossbow sticking out right below the bony bulk of the joint. The pain hadn't registered yet with his blood in the battle, but Robb knew it would begin. At least it wasn't my sword arm, he began to think. "My lord!" Quickly leaping off of a horse, a sturdy Essosi mare by the looks of it, Lady Tyene rushed towards where the young wolf stood. Easing him onto the ground, she frowned at the scope of the battle. "Looks like I got here just in time." Robb looked at her suspiciously. "Where the fuck did you come from?" "Doesn't matter. You need to order a retreat now." "And how do I do that without being pursued?" The Dornish princess smirked at the distant hoofbeats and guttural cries began to overwhelm the floodplain. The hooting war cries echoed all over the battlefield. "Fucking hells!" Tywin smirked. Spyglass trained on the horde as it rapidly reached their lines. "Signal Prince Trystane, holding force of the young wolf and engage the Dothraki. Commit all reserves and blocking formation." He clenched his fists. "Fucking hell!" "Father, it is still a victory!" Tywin seethed at his son. "But the young wolf still lives to fight another day." "It may not be a slaughter, but we have at least taken the field." Jaime was silenced by a backhand to the cheek. "Enough from you, boy. We only deal in utter victories here." Angry as he was, Tywin knew his son had a point. They did secure a victory, one that would likely secure the Crown lands and retake the majority of the southern Riverlands, but not the stunning blow he had engineered. The war would still go on. A single raven passing overhead witnessed the whole thing. A mass of Dothraki riders slamming into the hastily erected Lannister flank guard. Fresh troops, but so were the horsemen they were up against. Bowmen joining in the fray. A breakthrough wasn't achieved, but Tyene and the horde had done what they needed to do. Under the cover of their respite, the ravaged porcupine withdrew into the forest, in relatively good order, all things considered. Gendry Baratheon reinforcing the flank and engaging in a fighting withdrawal with Cabin Lannister's knights. A defeat, a crushing one, but not a total disaster. Milky white eyes blinking, the walk silently transferred information to the host of thousands of miles away. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that, because I did. I like the idea of Jon also being a man of culture as Rhaegar was, because he doesn't have much of a choice in the actual show or the books, does he? Poor guy. And not much from Dany this chapter either, but that battle. I like that scene between Robb and Gendry about the shields. That's kind of funny, I think. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe, yada yada yada. Take a good care of yourselves, my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Bye!